So, several months ago, back in April, I believe, shortly after a vote bot attack pushed my subscribers up over 100, I decided I was going to try my hand at one of those silly, question videos. And not surprising, given my low subscriber count, I didn't get a whole lot of response. I really only got one serious question, and I really only got one serious question, and it was outside of my realm of expertise by such a large margin that I had to do quite a bit of research before I felt remotely confident saying anything at all about it. The question comes from RowanFortuneWood, and Rowan asked me what I thought of the art pour l'art. Please excuse my horrendous French. Translated normally into English as art for art's sake. Well, over the course of my trying to read up and learn a little bit about it, so I didn't seem quite so horribly ignorant of the subject as I talked, I learned that this is basically a reference to a debate over didacticism in art, and whether or not it is possible or correct to have art that does not in any way attempt to teach anything, that does not in any way attempt to make a statement, to do such things, but instead seeks to basically be appreciated purely for its own sake, purely for the beauty of the art itself. Now, I've got, I don't know, 6 or 7 hours, I would wild guess, of me talking at the camera, talking around this subject, and I've got a bunch of various attempts to edit this down into a 10-minute video where I go over examples of what it means and everything else in an attempt to really explain where I'm coming from. But I'm wholly unsatisfied with all of the results I've had so far. So I'm just going to reshoot this and be done with it, because if I keep going the way I'm going, it's never going to be finished. Rowan will never have his answer, and my pedantic need for perfection will simply cause it to never exist, which is a common problem for me. I'm never satisfied with my own work, and if I don't just put it out there and be done with it, it never happens. So anyway, my basic answer is that I am horribly didactic by nature. I cannot imagine myself ever creating something that could be considered art that did not have the intention of making a statement or teaching or something else like that. I can't imagine it. I can appreciate beauty, but my idea of beauty is Spartan simplicity and functionality. I like things that do something. For example, Jackson Pollock, I don't see the value in it. I can't look at a Jackson Pollock painting and derive any pleasure from it. Some people seem to think he's great, but as far as an example of non-didactic art goes, that's certainly what it is. There is nothing really to be had there. No matter how hard I look at it and try to interpret it, I cannot actually come up with something that it represents. There are other examples of art and literature that are non-didactic in nature, that my own didactic nature allows me to see something in it, meaning and whatnot, that I can derive from it, that the author clearly didn't intend. An example of this would be pretty much anything by Edgar Allan Poe. Now, before this research into didacticism that I have done for this video, I would not have realized that Edgar Allan Poe was such an anti-didactic person. He even went so far as to call didactic poetry an abomination, which would mean that everything that Poe did, or most everything that Poe did, is probably non-didactic by intent. However, when I look at, for example, The Telltale Heart or The Fall of the House of Usher, I can see layers of meaning and thought much more complex than could possibly be meant by non-didactic art. So, is it me? I would have to say yes. I would have to say that I see the meaning that isn't actually there. So anyway, I'm going to be horribly unsatisfied with this when I'm done. But I am not going to spend a ton of time editing it. I'm going to cut it to 10 minutes and post it. Anyway, however, I can appreciate the I can appreciate that other people out there can actually derive pleasure and whatnot from non-didactic art that it purely exists for its own beauty. My wife is a good example of this. My wife doesn't have any urge to find meaning where there is none. My wife likes beauty, and she makes art all the time. Most of it is simply art, simply something she is doing because she enjoys it and she enjoys the result. She's not trying to say anything. She doesn't mean anything by it. She just thinks it looks good. I can appreciate the pleasure that this brings her, and that the pleasure that viewing this art brings many people. However, as a general rule, it brings no pleasure to me. The pleasure that I derive from art is the pleasure from interpreting it and finding meaning in it. I do tend to prefer art and didactic art that is open to some interpretation, where it's not entirely I don't know where I'm going with this, where it's not entirely intended to say something specific, where it's intended to allow for this multiple interpretations. I consider that to be the highest form of art. One in which, instead of answering all the questions, where it poses questions and leaves it for the viewer to come up with answers. I would consider that to be the highest form of art. I would consider that to be didactic art, although my example of Edgar Allan Poe says that many people might consider it non-didactic art. So, anyway, here's about my 10 minutes. I really apologize for taking 4 months to do this, and then when I finally actually do it, I do it in a way that it does not deserve the amount of time I have put into this. But, clearly, if I keep going on the path I was going on, I will never finish. I kept thinking I was going to get it good and get it done, but I've been getting nowhere. So here it is. Maybe you can pose me some questions to further draw out something, and I can avoid trying to create perfection in a response and actually generate the discussion that you had originally intended, instead of, yeah. Anyway, that's it. I'm done. No editing. That's 10 minutes. Cut.